The morning sun rose over Colony Hannah. 7 like it did every other day. The sky turned orange and pink, and the farmers began walking to their fields. Children ran through the streets laughing and playing before school started. It was a peaceful place far from Earth, but it felt like home to the 12,000 humans who lived there. The New Dawn Academy stood at the center of the colony. It was a large white building where 2,400 children learned and grew. Teachers prepared their lessons. Parents dropped off their kids with hugs and kisses. Nobody knew that this would be the last normal morning they would ever have. Far above the planet is hidden behind the largest moon. 12 Velic warships waited in silence. The Velic were insect creatures with hard shells and cold eyes. They had watched humans for many years and believed they understood them. To the Velic, humans were weak. They wasted resources on their young. They made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. Overlord Tak, the supreme leader of the Velic Dominion, saw an opportunity. Humans will do anything to protect their offspring. Torek had told his commanders, "We take their children, and they will surrender. They will give us their technology, their worlds, everything." This is the weakness of emotional species. Commander Neth led the attack force. He was a veteran of many wars, and he did not expect much resistance from a farming colony. His orders were simple: capture as many human children as possible, kill anyone who resisted, and send a message to humanity that the Velic Dominion was not to be ignored. At exactly 9:47 in the morning, the Velic ships dropped from the sky. The first explosions destroyed the colony's communication towers. The second wave hit the small defense station, killing the 50 militia members before they could even reach their weapons. Velic soldiers poured out of landing craft, their weapons firing at anything that moved. Teacher Kim Soo was showing her students how to paint flowers when the ceiling exploded. She threw herself over 3 children, shielding them with her body. The Velic soldiers found her like that, dead, still protecting the kids beneath her. They pulled the crying children away and pushed them toward the transport ships. Throughout the colony, scenes of horror repeated themselves. Parents ran toward the school, screaming the names of their children. Velic soldiers cut them down without hesitation. Old farmer Chad grabbed a metal pipe and charged at an alien soldier. He managed to crack its shell before 3 others shot him in the back. He died with his hands still reaching toward the school where his granddaughter studied. Inside the academy, Principal Lee Yuna tried to organize an evacuation. She led a group of 60 children toward the underground shelters. They almost made it. A Velk squad found them in the hallway. Principal Lee stood in front of the children and spread her arms wide. "You will not touch them," she said. Velic commander tilted his head, studying this small human female who dared to challenge him. Then he raised his weapon and shot her. The children screamed as she fell. Some of them tried to run, some of them froze. The Velic took the ones they could catch and killed those who ran too fast to be useful. The attack lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. That's when it was over. 847 children lay dead in the streets, in the classrooms, in the arms of their parents. Another 312 children were locked in Velic transport ships, crying and calling for their mothers and fathers. The soldiers had killed over 3,000 adults. The rest were left alive. On purpose, Overlord Tak wanted. Survivors, he wanted them to tell other humans what happened when you refused to respect the Velic Dominion, but before the communication towers fell, one signal escaped. A young technician named Gong Jie had crawled through the burning wreckage of his station with a hole in his stomach. With his last breath he activated the emergency beacon. The message was short: Colony Hannah 7 under attack, children taken, send help. Then he died, his blood pooling around the console that would save his species from ever suffering such an attack. Again, the signal traveled through space. At the speed of light, it bounced from relay station to relay station. 8 hours later it reached Earth. Lieutenant Nomina was working the night shift at Earth High Command when the message arrived. She was a quiet woman who spent her days analyzing alien communications. When she heard the recording, her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She played it again. Then she ran. Admiral Kung was asleep when the call came. He was 62 years old, a man who had served humanity for 40 years. He had fought pirates, negotiated with alien empires, and kept the peace across 100 worlds. His hair was gray, his face was lined, but his eyes were still sharp. He listened to the message without expression. He read the initial reports as they came in. He looked at the list of the dead, scrolling through name after name after name. Then he saw the ages: 6 years old, 8 years old, 4 years old, 11 years old. Admiral Ke sat in silence for exactly 3 minutes. His staff watched him nervously. Nobody dared to speak. When he finally moved, he pressed a single button on his console. This button had not been pressed in 200 years. It connected him to every human military vessel, every station, every outpost in the galaxy. This is Admiral Kong, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Navy, he said. His voice was calm, completely calm. I am declaring condition absolute. All ships, all personnel, no exceptions. The Velic Dominion has attacked Colony Hannah 7 and murdered our children. Effective immediately. We are at total war. He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something in his voice that made even his oldest officers feel afraid. They will learn what happens when you harm human children. They will learn, and then they will be gone. Across the galaxy, humanity began to wake up, and the Velic had no idea what they had just started. The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every man, woman, and child knew what had happened on Colony Hannah 7. They saw the images of the destroyed school. They read the names of the dead children. They watched the footage that survivors had recorded on their personal devices, and something changed in the heart of humanity. For 200 years, humans had been peaceful. They traded with alien species. They signed treaties. They built colonies and raised families and looked toward a future of cooperation. But buried deep inside every human was something old and dark, something that their alien neighbors had never seen, something that the Velic were about to discover. On Earth, the streets filled with people demanding action, not protests for peace, not calls for negotiation. Millions of humans stood together and shouted one word: vengeance. Fathers who had never held a weapon signed up for military service. Mothers who had never left their home planets volunteered for any duty that would help the war effort. Old soldiers came out of retirement. young students. Left their universities, Admiral Kong watched the mobilization reports from his command center. Ships that had been sitting in repair docks were being made ready for battle. Weapons factories that had been closed for decades were opening. Again, every human colony was sending troops, supplies, and ships. The United Earth Navy grew from 800 active warships to over 4,000 in just 6 days. Protocol Omega, that was what they called it. Total species-level warfare. The last time humanity had invoked this protocol, they had been fighting among themselves, nearly destroying their own planet. Now, for the first time, all of humanity was united against an outside enemy. Captain Hannah stood before Admiral Kung and requested command of the Vanguard fleet. She was 38 years old with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her nephew, a 7-year-old boy named Yun Seo, had been among the children killed at the academy. She had received the news while commanding a patrol mission near the outer rim. She had not cried, she had not screamed, she had simply changed course and headed straight for Earth. I want to be first, she told the Admiral. I want them to see my ship before they die. Admiral Kai looked at her for a long moment. He saw the cold fire in her eyes. He understood it. He felt it himself. The Vanguard fleet is yours, he said. Make them regret the day they were born. Meanwhile, Dr. Park Seo worked in a laboratory deep beneath the surface of Mars. He was a xenobiologist, scientist who studied alien life forms. For years, his work had been about understanding other species, finding ways for humans and aliens to coexist. Now his superiors had given him a different task. We need to know everything about Velic biology. They told him every weakness, every vulnerability, everything. Dr. Parkyo did not ask why. He already knew. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched with growing concern. The Council was made up of 12 spacefaring species who had agreed to maintain peace and cooperation. Humans had been members for 150 years. They had always been seen as friendly, perhaps too emotional, but generally harmless. Now the Council was seeing something different. Ambassador Rellies of the Tranny Federation was sent to speak with Admiral Kung Ti. The Tranny were an ancient species known for their wisdom and their skill at diplomacy. Rallies had resolved conflicts between empires. He had prevented wars that would have killed billions. He entered the human command center confident that he could find a peaceful solution. He left 3 hours later with fear in his heart. They refused all negotiation. He reported to the Council. Admiral Kung said, and I quote, "You may observe, you may not interfere. This is no longer a conflict. It is an extinction." The Council members looked at each other in shock. Extinction. The humans were not planning to defeat the Velk. They were planning to erase them from existence. Elder Seiss of the Velic Dominion had tried to warn Overlord Tak. She was old, the oldest member of the Velk ruling council, and she had studied humans longer than anyone else in her species. She had read their history. She had seen what they did to enemies who threatened their families. You made a terrible mistake, she told Tak. Humans do not negotiate. When their children are involved, they do not make deals. They do not accept surrender. They destroy completely and totally. Overlord Tak clicked his mandibles in amusement. They are soft creatures. They cry over their dead. They let feelings control their decisions. Our fleet will crush any force they send, and when they see their ships burning, they will beg for peace. You do not understand, Elder Seiss said. Their crying is not weakness, it is fuel. Every tear becomes rage, every dead child becomes a reason to fight harder. You have given them 459 reasons to destroy us, but Torek did not listen. He never listened. On Velik Prime, the captured children were held in cold metal cells. Scientists studied them, took samples of their blood and tissue, and recorded their reactions to pain and fear. Children cried for their parents. They held each other in the darkness. They did not understand why this was happening to them. One little girl, only 5 years old, asked a Velik guard when she could go home. The guard did not answer. He did not even look at her. To him, she was just a specimen, a tool to control the human species. He could not imagine that this small crying creature was the reason entire species was about to die. Back on Earth, the fleet was almost ready. 4,000 warships, 2 million soldiers, weapons that had not been used in centuries. Captain Yun Hannah stood on the bridge of her ship, the Wrath of Sol, and looked at the stars. As soon she whispered, "Soon I will find you, and I will make them pay for what they did." The largest military force in galactic history began to move, and Elder Seiss watched her long-range sensors with growing dread as thousands of human ships appeared, moving toward Velik space like a wave of death. What have we done? She whispered to herself. What have we done? The human fleet arrived at Velik Prime on a cold morning. 4,000 warships filled the sky. Like angry stars, the Velik defense fleet, 1,000 ships strong, moved to intercept them. Commander Neth, the same officer who had led the attack on Colony Hannah 7, commanded the defense. He was confident. His ships were powerful. His soldiers were trained. He had fought many battles and won them all. He would not win this one. Captain Yun Hannah's voice came through the communication channels, broadcast to every ship on both sides. This is the United Earth Navy. You took our children. You killed our children. Today you answer for that crime. We will not accept surrender. We will not negotiate. We will not stop until justice is done. Then the humans attacked. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew straight at the Velik lines without fear. They did not try to stay safe. They did not try to minimize their losses. They wanted to get close. They wanted to look their enemies in the eyes before they killed them. The Wrath of Sol led the charge. Captain Yun Hannah sat in her command chair, her face calm, but her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests around her. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Velik ships fired everything they had. Human ships exploded, but for every human ship that fell, 10 kept coming. Target the command ship. Yun Hannah ordered. I want Neth alive. Admiral's orders. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of fire and death and screaming metal. The Velik fought hard, but they were facing something they had never encountered before. Humans who were not afraid to die. Ships with damaged engines rammed themselves into Velik carriers. Soldiers with no ammunition charged with knives and bare hands. There was no retreat. There was no surrender. By the end, every single Velik warship was destroyed or disabled. Not one escaped. Commander Neth was pulled from the wreckage of his flagship, alive but broken. Human soldiers dragged him to a transport ship. Without speaking a word, their silence was more terrifying than any threat. While the battle raged in space, Sergeant Big Jin led a small team to the surface. Their mission was simple: find the children and bring them home. 40 soldiers dropped through the atmosphere in stealth pods, landing near the research facility where the prisoners were held. The facility was heavily guarded, but the Velik were distracted by the space battle above. Big Jin and his team moved through the shadows, killing guards silently. They had trained for years for missions like this, but nothing had prepared them for what they found inside. The children were kept in small metal cages like animals. Many of them were sick. Many of them had marks on their bodies from experiments. They looked up at the human soldiers with wide, frightened eyes. They had been told that no one was coming for them. They had started to believe it. Bijin knelt before a small boy who was too weak to stand. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're here. We're taking you home." The boy started to cry. Then other children started to cry. Soldiers who had killed without emotion minutes earlier now had tears running down their faces as they carried children out of their cages, but the numbers did not match. 312 children had been taken from Colony Hana 7. Only 198 were still alive. Rest had died during the experiments. Their small bodies were found in a room in the back of the facility, stacked like garbage. Sergeant Beek Jin recorded everything: the cages, the experiment rooms, the bodies. Admiral Kang Tae had ordered him to document it all. Galaxy would see what the Velik had done. The rescue was broadcast on all Velik communication channels. Every Velik on every planet watched as human soldiers carried their children to safety. They saw the tears on the soldiers' faces. They saw the gentle way they held the small bodies, and they saw something else in those soldiers' eyes, something that made even the bravest Velik feel cold. Absolute hatred, total commitment. These humans would not stop until every Velk paid for what had happened in that facility. Commander Neth was brought before Admiral Kung on the command ship. The Velik officer was chained and bleeding, but he still tried to stand straight. He had been a warrior his whole life. He would not show fear. Admiral Count did not speak at first. He simply turned on a screen that showed the room where the dead children had been found. Neth was forced to watch. Then the Admiral showed him footage of the experiments, the screaming, the crying, the small hands reaching for help that never came. "You did this," Admiral Kong said. His voice was quiet. "You ordered this. They were just human offspring," Neth replied. "Resources to be used. Your species is too emotional." About Admiral Kung raised his hand and Neth stopped talking. The Admiral walked to a window and looked out at Velik Prime below. "Begin orbital bombardment," he said. "Military targets first. Let them see what's coming." Below on the planet's surface, fire began to rain from the sky. Velik military bases exploded one by one. Defense stations, weapons factories, training facilities. The humans were systematic, precise, merciless. The rescued children were brought aboard the Wrath of Soul. Captain Yun Hana met them personally. She knelt before a small girl with dark hair and bruises on her arms. "What did they do to you?" Hannah asked gently. The little girl leaned close and whispered in her ear. Her words were quiet, meant only for the captain. No one else heard what she said, but everyone saw Captain Yun Hana's face change. The sadness disappeared. The gentleness vanished. What remained was something ancient and terrible, something that the Velik had woken up when they touched humanity's children. She stood and looked at her officers. Her voice was steady but cold as ice. No mercy, no exceptions, not a single. One of them survives, and humanity's vengeance truly began. Overlord Tak sent his first surrender offer 3 days after the battle at Velik. Prime, he offered to return all human prisoners. He offered to pay compensation. He offered to execute the officers responsible for the attack on Colony Hannah 7. He even offered to give up half of territory. Admiral Kong Tae did not respond. The second offer came a week later. Torek promised complete submission. The Velik Dominion would become a servant state to humanity. They would give up all weapons. They would accept human governors on every planet. They would do anything, absolutely anything, to stop the destruction. Admiral Kung did not respond. The human fleet spread across Velik space like a plague. They moved from system to system, planet to planet, destroying everything they found. Shipyards were reduced to dust. Mining operations were demolished. Agricultural worlds were burned. The Velik had built their empire over thousands of years. Humanity was erasing it in months. Dr. Park Saya worked day and night in his laboratory. His team had studied Velik biology for weeks, mapping every cell, every gene, every weakness in their bodies. Now they were ready. The doctor looked at the small container in his hand. Inside was a biological agent designed to target Velik genetic markers. It would spread through air, water, and physical contact. It would kill only Velik. Nothing else would be harmed. You sure about this? One of his assistants asked. This could kill billions. Dr. Park thought about the footage he had seen from the research facility, the children in cages, the small bodies in the back room, the experiment logs that described in cold scientific language how Velik researchers had taken human children apart to see how they worked. Yes, he said, I'm sure the Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from all 12 member species gathered to discuss the human campaign against the Velik ambassador. Rallies of the tranny stood before the assembly with a grim expression. Must intervene, he said. What the humans are doing is genocide. It goes against everything our council stands for. And what the Velik did, another representative asked. They murdered children. They performed experiments on them. Is that not also against what we stand for? The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to stop the humans by force. Others wanted to stay out of the conflict entirely. A few quietly admitted that they were glad someone was finally teaching the Velik a lesson. The Velik had bullied smaller species for centuries. Now they were learning what it felt like to be powerless. In the end, the council sent a formal protest to humanity. Admiral Kangte's response was simple. Humanity was withdrawing from the Galactic Council effective immediately. They did not need alien approval. They did not want alien interference. This was between humans and the Velik. The message was clear. Stay out of our way. Elder Seiss watched her world die. From her tower on Velik Prime she could see the fires burning across the continent. Human ships circled overhead like predators, striking at any target that showed signs of military activity. The population of the capital city had dropped from 50 million to 12 million. The rest had fled, been killed, or simply disappeared. She recorded a message and broadcast it. Across the galaxy, it was a plea for help directed at any species that would. Listen, please, she said, her voice breaking. Please stop them. We were wrong. We made a terrible mistake, but this is not justice. This is extinction. Surely there must be some limit to their anger. Surely they must. The transmission was cut off when a human missile struck her communication tower. Elder Sci survived, but barely. She crawled through the rubble of what had been her home, finally understanding what she had tried to warn to about. There was no limit to human anger, not when their children were involved. 3 months after the war began, the Velic population had dropped from 80 billion to 12 billion. Entire worlds were empty. Once proud cities were smoking ruins. The survivors hid in caves and bunkers, starving and afraid, waiting for the humans to find them. Commander Neth was executed publicly on the anniversary of the Colony Hannah 7 attack. He was brought before a crowd of human soldiers and civilians, many of them family members of the murdered children. Admiral Kung read the charges: murder, torture, crimes against humanity, crimes against children. Neth was allowed final words. He looked at the crowd with his compound eyes, searching for some sign of mercy, some hint that humans might spare his people if he said the right thing. He found nothing but cold hatred staring back at him. We didn't know, he said finally. We didn't understand what humans were. We thought you were weak. We thought your love for your offspring was a flaw to be exploited. We were wrong. You are not weak. You are the most terrifying species in the galaxy. And we woke you up. He was executed 1 minute later. His body was left for the crowd to see, a reminder of what happened to those who harmed human children. Overlord Tak sat alone in his crumbling palace. His advisors were dead. His armies were destroyed. His empire was gone. He had been the most powerful leader in Velic history, ruler of a 100 worlds. Now he was nothing. Communication screen flickered to life. Admiral Kung's face appeared, the first time he had directly addressed the Velic leader since the war began. I want you to understand something, the Admiral said. This is not about territory. This is not about power. This is not about politics. This is about 459 children who will never grow up. This is about parents who will never see their sons and daughters again. This is about the screams of children in your research facility. Torek tried to speak, but Kong continued. You thought our love for our children made us weak. You were wrong. It makes us monsters, and monsters do not stop until their enemies are gone. The screen went dark. Outside the palace windows, Tora could see human ships descending toward the last major city on Velic Prime. Tomorrow Dr. Park Seek's biological agent would be released. In 6 months, the Velic home world would be completely lifeless. The extinction had begun. 1 year had passed since the attack on Colony Hannah 7. The Velic Dominion no longer existed. Their home world was a dead rock covered in dust and silence. Their colonies were empty ruins. Their once great fleet was scattered, debris floating in the darkness of space. Of the 80 billion Velic who had lived before the war, fewer than 10,000 remained. They were scattered across the galaxy, hiding on remote stations and forgotten outposts, afraid to show themselves. The species that had terrorized smaller civilizations for centuries was now nearly extinct, and the galaxy would never forget how it happened. Admiral Kong Tae retired quietly 3 months after the war ended. He gave no speeches, he attended no ceremonies. He simply walked away from his command and returned to a small house on Earth, where he had grown up. Some said he was proud of what he had done, others said he was haunted by it. The truth was probably somewhere in between. He never spoke publicly about the Velic War. When reporters asked him questions, he simply said, "I did what any human would do. I protected our children. I made sure no one would ever think about hurting them again." Dr. Park Seo returned to his normal research after the war. He studied alien plants and microorganisms, searching for new medicines and agricultural techniques. His colleagues noticed that he never talked about his work during the Velic conflict. The biological agent he had created was classified at the highest level. Only a handful of people knew the full details of what it had done. Sometimes late at night, Dr. Park's eye would sit alone in his laboratory and stare at his hands. These hands had created something that killed billions. He had told himself it was justice. He had told himself the Velic deserved it, but in the quiet moments he wondered if justice and revenge were really the same thing. He never found an answer. Captain Yun Hannah remained in the Navy. She was promoted to admiral and given command of the new human defense fleet. Her ship, the Wrath of Seoul, became a symbol of humanity's protective fury. Every year, on the anniversary of the colony Hannah 7 attack, she would visit the memorial built on the planet's surface and leave flowers for her nephew. The memorial was simple, a white stone wall with the names of everyone who had died. 847 children, 3,247 adults. The wall stood in the center of what had once been the New Dawn Academy. Around it, a garden had been planted. Flowers of every color grew there now, tended by volunteers who came from all over human space. The 198 children who had been rescued were given the best care humanity could provide. Doctors, therapists, teachers, and families came together to help them heal. It was slow work. Many of the children had nightmares. Some could not speak for months. A few never fully recovered from what had been done to them, but humanity did not abandon them. These children had become sacred. Their survival was proof that even in the darkest moments, humans would fight to protect their young. Their recovery became a project that united all of humanity. The Galactic Council watched the aftermath of the war with a mixture of fear and respect. For over a century, they had seen humans as friendly traders and peaceful explorers. Now they understood that this was only one side of the species. There was another side, a dark side that emerged when human children were threatened. Humans were officially designated as Tier 1 protected species. This designation was usually given to species that were endangered or vulnerable. The humans were neither. The Council gave them this status because they were afraid. They wanted other species to understand that attacking humans was the worst possible decision any civilization could make. New laws were passed throughout the galaxy. Human children were to be protected at all costs. Any species that harmed human offspring would face immediate intervention from the Council, not because the Council cared so deeply about justice, but because they knew that if they did not act, the humans would, and the humans would not stop at one world on a small station at the edge of explored space. A young alien ambassador named Tira was preparing for her first diplomatic mission. She had been assigned to the human embassy, a posting that many of her colleagues had refused. They were afraid of humans now, everyone was. Tira was curious, not afraid. She wanted to understand these strange beings who loved so deeply that they were willing to destroy an entire species to protect their young dot. At a formal dinner, she found herself seated next to an elderly human woman named Abura. The woman had gray hair and kind eyes, but there was something hard beneath her gentle smile. Tira later learned that Abura had lost her grandson on Colony Hannah 7. The boy had been 6 years old. I have a question, Tira said carefully. I hope it is not rude to ask. Go ahead, Abura replied. Why did humanity respond so extremely? The Velic were terrible, yes, but extinction, the death of billions. Some in my government think this was too much. They think humans lost control. Abura was quiet for a moment. She took a sip of her tea and looked out the window at the stars. In the old days on Earth, she said, there was a saying. Every culture had some version of it. Touch my child and I will end your bloodline. She smiled gently, but her eyes were cold. We simply had the means to keep that promise. Tara felt a chill run down her spine. She understood now. Humans were not monsters. They were not cruel by nature. They were parents, and parents, when their children are threatened, become something that no army can stop. Across the galaxy, in the ruins of Velic Prime, wind blew through empty streets. The great towers had fallen. The proud cities were dust. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. But if you listened carefully, you could almost hear an echo, the laughter of children playing, the voices of parents calling them home for dinner, the sounds of a colony that had once been peaceful and happy before the Vel came. Those sounds were gone, now replaced by silence. But the silence was not empty. It was a warning, a message to every species in the galaxy who might ever consider harming human children. This is what happens. This is what we will do. This is how far we will go. Remember the Velic and never make the same mistake.